Hey, good people. Welcome to Psychology Noir. Dr. Lund here. Let's talk about an enmeshed relationship between a mother and her son. I want to take a look at the pathology that possibly was present from the letter Roberta Laundrie wrote to her son Brian Laundrie, who was involved in the murder of Gabby Petito last year. This isn't any type of a legal analysis. There are far better experts and channels to review the legalities of this letter and the significance of it going forward in the Petito lawsuit against the Laundries, believing that they knew Gabby had been murdered as they were desperately trying to find her, believing that she was missing. I think there's some really interesting aspects of this letter that, to me, shows a very odd pathology that could contribute to some behaviors that, at least at this point in time, we know Brian possessed by the fact that before he committed suicide, he had written a confession stating that he had in fact murdered Gabby. Now, basically, up until this point, the attorney for the Laundries did not want to release this letter. Roberta, the mother who wrote it, had said that she wrote it before Gabby and Brian had gone on their long-distance trip to Montana, Wyoming, and so it wasn't relevant, had no relevance to Gabby's murder or the lawsuit that the Petitos were bringing against the Laundries. However, a judge decided that it needed to be produced so that the Petito's attorney could look at it, and as legally things progressed, there would be a decision of how significant this letter would play into the lawsuit and proving or not proving that the Laundries may or may not have known that Brian had murdered Gabby. So let me go ahead and read the letter. And it starts with it being addressed to Brian, and in parentheses, burn after reading. The letter says, I just want you to remember I will always love you, and I know you will always love me. You are my boy. Nothing can ever make me stop loving you. Nothing will or could ever divide us. No matter what we do or where we go or what we say, we will always love each other. If you're in jail, I will bake a cake with a file in it. If you need to dispose of a body, I will show up with a shovel and garbage bags. If you fly to the moon, I will be watching the skies for your re-entry. If you say you hate my guts, I'll get new guts. Remember that love is a verb, not a noun. It's not a thing, it's not words, it's actions. Watch people's actions to know if they love you, not their words. Therefore, I am certain that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor the ruling spirits, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers from above, nor powers from below, nothing in the entire created world can separate our love. Neither hostile powers, nor messengers of heaven, nor monarchs of earth, nothing has the power to separate us. And she cited Romans 8:3-8, the extended version. Nothing can separate us, not hatred, not hunger, not homelessness, not threats, not even sin. Not the thinkable or the unthinkable can get between us. Not time, not miles and miles and miles. Now, in response to this letter going public, Roberta Laundrie stated that this letter to Brian was written prior to Gabby and Brian's trip, and that she truly loves her son and simply wanted to convey to him how much he meant to her and how much she loved him. She says, I'm sure people use phrases all the time to express their love to their loved ones, the depths of their love. Although I chose words that I thought would be impactful with Brian given our relationship, the letter was in no way related to Gabby. Please read the entire letter before you believe the hype put out by the Petito's attorney, Pat Riley. My first reaction to reading this letter is that something happened to precipitate Roberta to write this letter, to be able to intently express that she unconditionally loves Brian. And usually something like this type of conversation, like I said, there's an intensity to it that you don't find in a card or a birthday card, from a mother to a son. But this seems like this is a product of something that happened between them, that she again wants to reinforce the fact that she unconditionally loves him. Now, from what Roberta reports, she wrote this letter before Brian and Gabby went on this horrendous ending trip. But there's nothing in there about him going on the trip, certainly nothing about Gabby, about their relationship, he and Gabby getting married in the future. This is, again, all intensive between her relationship with him. And if in fact she wrote this before they had left on the trip, I'm wondering if she felt some kind of threat with them going off, leaving their house, because Gabby was in fact staying with the Laundries for a period of time. And so I don't know if she felt threatened. It just, again, the intensity of the words is something that just borders on inappropriate with the son. Now remember, this is all just my speculation. I'm just reading a letter from a mother to her son and sort of assessing what kind of pathology I hear in it. There really is very little information known about Brian's relationship with his mother and his father. The father seems to be sort of absent in this picture. You don't hear much about him or his relationship with Roberta, or the relationship with Gabby and Brian, which I think is interesting because he's absent from this dynamic, at least the information that's out in the public. We don't have any information. But the one thing I sense with this letter is, again, an enmeshed relationship between a mother and a son really typically refers to the interaction where the boundaries between them are blurred or fused, resulting in an unhealthy level of emotional closeness or dependency. And it sounds like Brian going off on this trip, planning to get married, that Roberta is sort of restaking her claim of, again, undying, unconditional, nothing will separate us ever, 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 in the words that she used in the letter, which again seems very overdramatic, over-enmeshed, overfused, if you will, with her relationship with Brian. Now, some of the characteristics of an enmeshed relationship between a mother and a son includes things like an overly involved parent, where the mom becomes so involved and enmeshed in her son's life, either making decisions for him or really not allowing him or not wanting him to have a good developed sense of independence and autonomy. Fostering emotional dependency is a big issue where the mother develops a strong emotional dependency on the son and vice versa, that each are relying very heavily on one another for emotional support, validation, and the fulfillment of needs, especially if this is mainly coming from the mother's spin on the relationship. It puts the son in a very vulnerable position, and it becomes his role then to be responsible for the mother's emotion and happiness and welfare. And this, of course, includes the lack of boundaries. Again, the mother intruding into the personal space and thoughts and decisions of the son, and again leading to a lack of privacy, autonomy, and individuality in the relationship, which his relationship with Gabby would definitely be a threat to a mom who has developed a very enmeshed relationship with her son. And of course, emotional manipulation. When you look at the letter and the way how she's expressing how they are fused, whether in life or death, and the things that she would do if he goes to the moon, she'll be watching the sky for his re-entry. Some of that is indicative of some emotional manipulation where the mother uses guilt or other kind of tactics to maintain a control and to keep the son emotionally close, which really creates a sense of obligation and hinders the son's ability to establish any kind of healthy emotional boundaries. And again, leading to some role reversal where the mother relies on the son for emotional support, companionship, or to fulfill unmet needs. And these may not have anything to do with sexual needs, but they have to do with heavy emotional needs, which again skews the boundaries and the limits of the relationship, as well as limiting social interactions. We don't know if Brian had many friends, and it sounded like he really didn't. Many of Gabby's friends didn't like him and saw him as very controlling, where at one time she wanted to go out with her friends and he took her wallet with her ID and her driver's license to keep her from going. And so having this limited social interaction bond with his mother possibly can then restrict his ability to develop healthy relationships with peers and establish independence and explore his own interests and aspirations. If in fact this letter is indicative of an enmeshed relationship between Roberta and Brian, then it would really make sense of some of the effects this relationship would have on Brian. And one of those would be, again, learned behavior. Growing up with an enmeshed relationship, a son would experience them directly behaviors directly from his mother, where these patterns would be internalized and then replicated in his own relationships as he perceives them to be normal. The lack of boundaries that happen in a meshed relationship often lack clear, distinct limits and blur boundaries. And so that's going to affect Brian's future relationships, which it certainly did with Gabby. A person could struggle with respecting the autonomy and personal space of his partner, leading to controlling behaviors in an attempt to maintain a sense of closeness or control, or both. And I think that was demonstrated from the little we know about the relationship between Gabby and Brian, and of course, the horrible outcome of that relationship. Again, dependency and insecurity. Meshed relationships foster emotional dependency and insecurity, so the person is going to take that into adulthood and seek out partners that basically foster this kind of relationship, and when they don't, then of course there's going to be dramatic conflict and emotional regulation difficulties, which obviously was part of Gabby and Brian's relationship. And a son who experiences enmeshment will have difficulty regulating their own emotions independently. They try to control their partner's behavior to manage their own emotional discomfort or avoid confronting their own unresolved emotional issues. And if they're not able to do that, then they react in a very dramatic, unhealthy way. And of course, we saw that with the end of the relationship with Brian murdering Gabby, and then Brian taking his own life. Enmeshed relationships also create an imbalance of a power dynamic, where the son feels entitled to control or dominate his partner. And of course, this manifests in basically power and control over their partner's activity, isolating them from friends and family, or exerting coercive control over decision making. And I think we heard examples of some of that in Brian and Gabby's relationship. And again, one of the biggest things is difficulty with conflict resolution. Enmeshed relationships often lack healthy conflict resolution skills. The son will struggle with expressing his own needs and opinion assertively, leading to a tendency to control or manipulate his partner during disagreements or conflicts, which can easily become physical. And of course, the repeating of relationship patterns. Without any kind of intervention, the person who's experiencing the enmeshment may unconsciously, again, seek out partners who can replicate the dynamic that he experienced with his mother. Now, interestingly, whether Roberta wrote this letter to Brian before the trip that ended in Gabby's murder and ultimately Brian's suicide, or if she wrote it after, knowing that Brian had murdered Gabby. Again, I think it is so representative of a mother desperately trying to maintain her status in the name of love and undying and unconditional love, where, again, there's no mention of anybody but Brian, and basically she's reinforcing for him that he loves her just as much as she loves him, and speaking for him in the letter. But interestingly, no mention of the father, no mention of the relationship with Brian's sister, no mention of the relationship with Gabby, which to me gives me some hints that I only speculate that she had felt threatened by the relationship with Gabby, which to me would make total sense of the reaction of the Laundries when Brian came back from the trip without Gabby in her van and very quickly hired a lawyer and totally remained silent and cut off any kind of contact with Gabby Petito's parents. And so they were not present and accounted for in efforts to try to find Gabby, because I suspect that they knew Gabby wasn't alive any longer. So I think there's a lot of pathology demonstrated in that letter, and I really don't focus on, the mention of if you need to hide a body, I'll bring a shovel, or, bake a cake with a file in it. I think some of those analogies are not concrete analogies, at least in my opinion. But the letter overall, I think, is a very, very supported kind of proof of how enmeshed the mother was with Brian. And I think Brian, again, trying to find some autonomy, his own relationship and future marriage, was something that, if the relationship was that enmeshed, the mother could not possibly have supported. So I wish we had more information about the relationship that Gabby had with his parents and that both Gabby's parents had with Brian's parents. There's a lot of missing pieces of information that would help identify the pathology better. But at this point in time, this is just my opinion of reading that letter that finally became public. And so if you have any opinions, I would love to hear them in the comments below. So please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, and I will see you in the next video.